Hi, welcome back to my channel. If this is the first time you are here, my name is Shri. I am a full-time RF engineer and this is my channel Upshot, and let's get into the content. Learning is an everlasting process in the human being's life. We tend to learn so many interesting things, and also we tend to forget the things as time progresses, especially when the learning is less challenging or less interesting. We can improve our retention of information by making the learning more interesting. When we make the learning more interesting, there is a higher brain activity, and higher brain activity leads to more brain connections, thus leading to improved retention of information. In this video, we are going to see 3 techniques which are going to help us to improve our retention. Let's go into it one by one. Technique number 1, Feynman technique. First devised by the Nobel-winning theoretical physicist Dr. Richard Feynman, it actually involves 4 steps, and they are: Step 1, pretend to teach to a high school kid. Once you have learned something, pretend to craft an explanation that is easier for a high school kid to understand. Try to avoid all the professional jargons that are involved in the explanation. If you are not able to create an explanation without the jargon, or if you cannot explain information in a simpler language, that's when you go on to step 2. Step 2 is identify the gaps in the explanation and learn. Soon after identifying the gaps, learn to give a simpler explanation to your jargons and a simpler explanation to the concept so that a high school kid can understand it. Shoot yourselves with as much voice as possible in order to simplify the question further. So for an example, when you have learned how 2 cell phones actually communicate with each other, shoot a why or how there. That will lead you to an explanation of RF technology or digital communication. And once you get to the bottom of it, you again shoot a why or how to it, and that will lead to the wave propagation. And once you get to the bottom of it, that is everything. Bottom of that is basic physics, which the kid will be able to understand. So this way you can actually get to the bottom of every concept that you are trying to learn. So the third step is organize and simplify. Now that you have come up with a clean understanding of everything and you have got to the bottom of it, it's time to create a story, meaning an explanation with a proper flow of thoughts, but in the reverse order as in the step 2, meaning first you explain what is the physics behind it, then go on to the wave propagation, and from wave propagation go to the RF technology, and from RF technology you explain how 2 cells or how 2 cell phones are actually communicating. That brings us to step 4, perform or demonstrate. This is the critical step to the learning process, because you have to find someone who can tolerate you with an explanation, or you can find your sibling or your parents even and ask them to sit down and try to explain it to you in the same order that you have learned. Go from the basic physics and go to the maximum or the detailed explanation that is possible. And once you have done that, you will actually have acquired a knowledge. You would have made a proper brain connection till the roots of the explanation, and you would have acquired a lot of notes on the same thing as well. This way you have made it more challenging, and thus leading to more brain connections and finally improved retention. That's the end of the Feynman technique. Now going to technique 2. So the technique 2 is called as the active recall. Most of us would have done this without even knowing that it is the active recall. So what we do is, once we learn, we'll actually learn a concept and we'll close the notebook and we'll try to recollect the information and try to quiz ourselves. The reason to ask the questions is because we have to learn the same way how we are going to be tested. For example, we have to be shooting our brains with the questions, because that's the way we are going to be tested in the examination in order to recollect the information that we have stored. So this actually helps in developing the brain connections with the questions in mind and eventually coming out with the answers. For example, years before, we identified that my grandmother was having a kidney problem, so she had to undergo dialysis. So I kept asking the doctor, what is dialysis and what are the alternatives to dialysis and what is the cost involved and is there a cure for the disease? So by shooting so much of questions about it, I learned about dialysis and I learned about kidney and how it is done at a very younger age. And if you ask me what is dialysis, and I'll be able to bring out the same explanation which got wired in my brain few years back. I would say this technique is far more superior than just going through a book and consuming the information that we have at hand. That brings us to the third technique, that is the spaced repetitions. We always get this advice from our parents or teachers to learn regularly or to learn every day. I'm not going to give you the same advice, but I'm going to back it with science. What you're seeing right now is the forgetting curve. On the x-axis, it is the time remembered, and on the y-axis is the memory percentage. And the curve pink is actually the first information or the day zero information. So after learning something, which is so it is at 100%, and after one day, which is 24 hours apart, you only retain 50% of the information. And if you revise the material after 24 hours, you will actually have a retention of over 65% at the end of day 2. And if you are revising the same material on the second day as well, you will actually retain about 80% of the information on the third day. And if you are revising again on the third day, you are retaining about 90% of the information, and you see that the curve is actually getting to become straight after multiple revisions. So what I would suggest is, after learning a material, try to revisit the material after 2 or 3 days, and over time the retention actually improves a lot, and thus you are retaining most of the information that you have consumed. After knowing all of this, you might feel that there are so much efforts that are involved here, and of course, yes, more information or more efforts on the information leads to higher brain activity. Higher brain activity leads to more brain connections and thus improves the retention. So the next one is the bonus technique. The bonus technique is nothing but the flashcards. I learned about it only a few weeks ago. So the flashcards is basically something that incorporates both technique 2 and technique 3, that is active recall and spaced repetitions. So this is how you do it. Take a piece of paper and write down question on one side, and turn the paper and write a brief explanation of an answer to that question. And this is basically a flashcard. If you use this flashcard to question yourselves and try to remember the answer, that is active recall. And if you try to use the flashcards in regular intervals, like once in 2 days or once in 3 days, again and again, that becomes a spaced repetition. I feel that the flashcards could be more useful. More people in the field of medical science usually use the flashcards in order to remember a lot of terminologies, but it's also practically impossible to maintain so much of flashcards in your life, because you will consume a lot of information and eventually it will lead to a room full of flashcards. So what I would suggest is, there is an app called Anki, which actually helps you to create flashcards based upon the information. It's very much like note taking. You just ask a question and you write an answer to it, and it makes a flashcard out of it. And in frequent intervals, it actually gives you a question from those flashcards and it will ask you to answer them. If you answer any questions wrong, it keeps giving you the same questions again and again in order to make you remember the information better in the long run. I hope you found all these techniques to be useful, and I hope you will be incorporating them into your life. I wish I knew some of these techniques when I was in school or college, but it's never late to do things in your life, because learning something with full on interest is like so soothing to your brain. You feel like your brain is getting massaged by essential oils or something like that. So it's actually an incredible feeling to love what you're learning. So enough from me today. Have a productive day and peace out.